The bright studio lights flickered on, casting a dazzling glow across the international broadcast stage. Cameras rolled as millions of viewers worldwide tuned in, eager to witness a historic conversation between world leaders. Among them stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, calm and poised, his eyes steady but heavy with the burden of his people's hopes. Tonight wasn't just any broadcast. It was a moment where the future of a continent seemed to hang in the balance. Opposite him was U.S. President Donald Trump, his reputation for bluntness and confrontation preceding him. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as unseen eyes watched, waiting for the first spark. The room seemed too still, too quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Behind the cameras, crew members exchanged nervous glances, sensing the storm about to break. No one could predict just how sharp the words would cut. No one could foresee the emotional impact this broadcast would have, not just on the studio audience, but on millions watching at home. Tonight, the battle was more than political. It was deeply personal. As the debate heated up, Donald Trump's tone grew sharper, his eyes narrowing toward Traoré. Then, with a sudden harsh voice that echoed across the studio, he spat out the word, "Nuisance." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to freeze time itself. Nuisance. A word so small yet heavy with cruelty and dismissal. It was meant to belittle, to push Captain Ibrahim Traoré down, to make him seem insignificant on the global stage. But it landed like a thunderclap. The studio fell into stunned silence. Some faces froze in shock, others in anger, but all were united in disbelief. Traoré's face didn't change. His eyes held a flicker of pain, but also something stronger, steadfast courage. He was not just a leader to his people. He was a symbol of resistance, of dignity. Yet inside, the insult burned. Not for himself, but for the millions who looked up to him. As the silence stretched, tension thickened, and the world held its breath, waiting to see if Traoré would break. Minutes felt like hours as Traoré sat quietly, his jaw clenched, lips pressed into a thin line. The studio's air was thick with expectation. Would he respond with anger? Would the broadcast spiral into chaos? But just as the tension threatened to explode, a figure rose slowly from his seat, former President Barack Obama. His expression calm, almost serene, he carried an air of quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. The crowd seemed to lean in, drawn by the promise of wisdom and reason. Obama's eyes locked with Trump's, then softened as he looked toward Traoré with respect. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but powerful. Words crafted not to wound, but to heal, to remind, and to inspire. The broadcast shifted in that instant. The narrative changed. The crowd shifted on their seats. And for the millions watching, it was a moment they would never forget. A moment when courage met compassion, and truth shone brighter than insult. The studio remained frozen in a heavy silence, as if the insult had stolen the very air. Viewers around the world sat glued to their screens, hearts pounding. Ibrahim Traoré sat perfectly still, his face unreadable to most, but inside a storm was raging. The word nuisance wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to erase years of struggle, sacrifice, and leadership. To those who knew Traoré's story, it was a painful wound to hear from one of the most powerful voices on earth. Behind the cameras, some crew members exchanged anxious glances. The pressure was palpable. Could Traoré hold his ground? Would he respond with fury or despair? The world waited. Leaders across continents held their breath. Suddenly, Traoré's eyes flickered with a quiet fire. He wasn't just a leader. He was a beacon for millions who faced hardship every day. This moment was bigger than him. It was about respect, dignity, and the fight for Africa's future. Ibrahim Traoré slowly raised his head, scanning the studio with calm, steady eyes. He did not shout. He did not flinch. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his voice measured but filled with undeniable strength. "Words can wound," he said softly, "but they can never silence the voice of those who fight for justice." His calm presence cut through the tension like a sharp blade. He spoke of his people's struggles, the endless nights without power, the children who dream of peace, the farmers who toil under scorching sun. He reminded the world that leadership was not about power or insults, but about responsibility and courage. The studio shifted again. Some audience members wiped tears quietly. Others nodded in respect. Ibrahim was not just defending himself, he was standing for millions who could not speak. His response was a quiet roar, one that echoed far beyond the studio walls. The silence in the studio gave way to restless murmurs. The insult had landed, but Traoré's composed answer unsettled many, especially Donald Trump. His confident smirk faltered as he realized the narrative was slipping. Across the room, cameras captured the changing expressions of the audience. Some confused, others inspired, a few visibly moved. The power dynamics in the room were shifting, but the most important voice had yet to speak. Before anyone could guess what would come next, former President Barack Obama slowly stood from his seat. His presence was magnetic, calm, yet commanding. Eyes turned to him expectantly. Millions watching held their breath. What would he say? How would he turn the tide? In this charged moment, the stage was set for a response that would resonate far beyond politics, striking deep into the hearts of people around the world. As Barack Obama rose from his chair, the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. The weight of history pressed down on the moment. Millions of viewers worldwide watched intently, sensing something extraordinary was about to happen. The usual chatter faded away into a heavy silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the studio lights. Donald Trump's confident expression wavered. His earlier insult hung heavily in the air, but he was no longer the one controlling the narrative. All eyes turned to Obama, whose calm presence filled the room like a steady beacon. Behind the cameras, staff whispered nervously. They could feel the tension spike. This was more than a political debate. It was a test of character, of respect, and of truth. Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly, the calm in his storm, waiting. The studio lights seemed brighter now, casting sharp shadows. The atmosphere crackled with electricity. What Obama said next would change everything, and no one in that room, or watching around the world, would ever forget it. Obama's voice was steady and clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Words matter," he began. "They build bridges or walls. They heal wounds or deepen them. To call a man a nuisance, especially one who carries the hopes of millions on his shoulders, is not just disrespectful. It is dangerous." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is more than a leader. He is a symbol of resilience for a continent that has faced unimaginable challenges. To dismiss him is to dismiss the dreams of countless families, of children striving for a better tomorrow. As Obama spoke, the crowd's energy shifted palpably. The silence broke into murmurs of agreement and nods of respect. The insult had been flipped on its head, exposing more about the insulter than the insulted. Obama looked directly at Trump. Leadership requires respect, courage, and humility. We all must remember that. The studio erupted in applause, but it was not the usual polite clapping. It was genuine, heartfelt, and loud. Some audience members stood, others wiped tears from their eyes. The cameras caught every reaction, broadcasting a moment of unity and hope to millions. Donald Trump's face tightened. The room was no longer his stage. The power of Obama's words had turned the tide. Even those skeptical before found themselves moved, unable to deny the truth. Ibrahim Traoré remained seated, but his eyes glistened with emotion. This was more than a victory in a debate. It was a recognition of his people's struggles and dreams. The broadcast wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about dignity, respect, and humanity. As the applause died down, the camera zoomed in on Traoré's face, reflecting both relief and a renewed determination. The story was far from over, but the battle for respect had been won. Across continents and time zones, millions of eyes stayed glued to their screens. The insult from Donald Trump was already shocking, but Barack Obama's calm, powerful response shifted the entire tone. People in living rooms, cafes, and offices felt the weight of the moment. In West Africa, families gathered around small TVs and smartphones. Children clung to their parents as they saw a leader who looked like their own, facing such bold disrespect, yet remaining dignified. Tears welled up quietly as hope sparked in hearts long battered by hardship. News outlets scrambled to capture the story's essence. Social media exploded with reactions, some angry, others inspired. Many shared videos of Traoré's quiet strength and Obama's eloquent words. The world was witnessing a rare moment, truth and courage standing firm amid chaos. Meanwhile, in the studio, Traoré's expression softened briefly. Despite the insult and the spotlight, he was not alone. He carried not just his own hope, but the hopes of millions, people who saw in him the future of their continent. Back in the studio, Traoré's voice finally broke the heavy silence, steady and full of resolve. "I do not speak for myself alone," he said, "but for every mother who prays for her child's safety, every farmer who works the land with bare hands, every young person dreaming of a future free from fear." He described the realities that often went unseen. Communities torn apart by conflict, the struggle to bring education to remote villages, the daily fight against poverty. His words were simple but powerful, touching the deepest human emotions. The crowd, now fully attentive, listened as he painted a picture of hope, unity, and resilience. The insult was no longer the story. It was the spirit of the people he represented that shone brightest. Even those initially skeptical found themselves moved, recognizing a leader whose strength wasn't just in politics, but in heart. It was a moment of connection across cultures, languages, and borders. As the broadcast neared its climax, the energy in the room grew electric. Barack Obama returned to the microphone, summing up the moment with a call to empathy and respect. "Leadership," he said, "is not measured by the harshness of words, but by the courage to stand tall when faced with them. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has shown that courage today, representing millions who deserve to be heard." Trump sat back, the fight draining from his posture as the narrative had clearly shifted. The crowd erupted into applause, not just for the words spoken, but for the spirit that now dominated the room. Outside the studio, the story spread like wildfire, sparking conversations in every corner of the globe. What had started as a harsh insult had become a historic moment of respect, courage, and hope. For millions, it was a reminder that dignity and truth could still shine, even in the darkest moments. Beyond the glare of the studio lights, the story was much bigger than politics. It was about real people. Families in Burkina Faso struggling to survive. Traoré carried their hopes, their fears, and their dreams in his heart. As he spoke softly, the camera captured close-ups of his face, determined yet vulnerable. He remembered the widows who lost husbands, children who slept hungry, and farmers whose fields lay fallow due to conflict. This was the true battle. Not between powerful men in a studio, but the fight to restore peace and dignity to everyday lives. Viewers watching at home began to understand the man behind the title. Traoré was no mere political figure. He was a symbol of resilience. His leadership wasn't about power or pride, but sacrifice and love for his people. Many quietly wiped tears as they saw a leader who carried the weight of a continent suffering without bitterness. This moment was more than a broadcast. It was a testament to humanity's strength. News of the broadcast spread like wildfire. Social media was flooded with messages of support for Traoré. Memes, heartfelt posts, and videos praising his dignity and composure trended worldwide. In cities from New York to Nairobi, people gathered around screens, inspired by a leader who refused to be broken by cruel words. Commentators and analysts debated fiercely, many agreeing that this broadcast was a turning point in how the world viewed African leadership. Even some skeptics found themselves moved by Traoré's honesty and calm strength. He had become more than a name. He was a movement, a symbol of hope in turbulent times. The insult that was meant to shame him had backfired spectacularly. Instead, it had illuminated his character, shining a light on the courage it takes to stand tall when everything is against you. Back in the studio, Traoré sat quietly, the glow of the lights soft against his face. He was exhausted, not from the confrontation, but from the weight of responsibility that never left him. He thought of the thousands of young men and women who looked up to him. He thought of the peace he desperately wished to build, piece by fragile piece. His strength was quiet but unbreakable. It came from knowing who he was and what he stood for. Unlike harsh words that quickly fade, true leadership leaves a mark on history. As cameras continued to roll, the world saw not a nuisance, but a man of honor and purpose, one whose story was just beginning to inspire millions. As the broadcast neared its final moments, Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly, his shoulders heavy but unbowed. The weight of an entire continent's hopes and struggles pressed upon him like a mountain. He remembered the faces of those who had trusted him, the farmers rising before dawn, mothers calming restless children at night, and young students dreaming beyond their harsh realities. Each carried a silent prayer for peace, for justice, for a leader who would not falter. This was not just politics, it was life and death. Yet in the face of insults and doubt, Traoré's spirit burned brighter. His strength was born from a deep love for his people and a relentless commitment to their future. No harsh words, no disrespect could shake that foundation. Tonight, millions had seen that strength, had felt the truth beneath the headlines. It was a moment of reckoning, a moment that would define history. The world did not forget. The broadcast became a symbol, a lesson in dignity, courage, and respect. Messages poured in from every corner of the globe. Many moved to tears by Traoré's resilience and Obama's wisdom. In the weeks that followed, Ibrahim's leadership was no longer questioned by the doubters, but celebrated by many. His vision for peace and progress began to take root, inspiring change that spread beyond borders. The insult meant to humiliate had instead revealed a leader who embodied hope. Traoré's journey had touched hearts and shifted minds. And though the road ahead was still long and difficult, a new chapter had begun, one written in courage and unity. As the broadcast ended, millions were left speechless, some wiping tears, others sitting in silent reflection. This wasn't just a story of conflict. It was a story of humanity, of hope triumphing over cruelty. If this story moved you, if Captain Ibrahim Traoré's courage touched your heart, please show your support. Like this video, subscribe for more stories that inspire and unite, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. Together, we can celebrate leaders who stand for dignity and fight for a better tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Let's keep hope alive, one story at a time.